Another game, another blown fourth quarter for the Miami Heat. What went wrong? Is it too late to fix it this season? And is there any point in even trying? We answered that and more on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat, whether you're tuning in on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members who cover this team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Recording this Sunday morning after the Heat blew another fourth quarter lead in their loss to the Bulls, dropping their third straight game. They lost to the Timberwolves on Friday night. Before we get to what happened in the Bulls game and whether or not the Heat are stealth tanking, I want to start with a stat, David. Heads up, not an awesome one. The Heat have blown a fourth quarter lead in 7 of its last 8 losses, and in a total of 14 losses this season. The Heat have blown a double-digit lead in 16 losses this season. Second behind only the Utah Jazz, who have done it one more time, 17. A Utah Jazz team that plays guys like Johnny Juzang in the fourth quarter, okay? That's where the Heat are at right now. I've seen the argument out there, like, slash those double-digit losses in half. If you save like 5 or 6 of those games instead of losing 16 of these double-digit leads, instead of losing 14 of these leads, whatever it is, like, all of a sudden the Heat are the 6th seed in the East and all this stuff. And I hear all that and I see it, but at the end of the day, this is what's going on. This team can't hold on to a fourth quarter lead. And watching back that game, I'll get to sort of my takeaways specifically from the fourth quarter against the Bulls on Saturday night. But just watching these games, it never seems like it's the same reason.
Yeah.
And even Terry Rozier was pretty good against Minnesota and Chicago. He wasn't the reason for the loss. He was. You could blame him for losing to Cleveland, and we certainly did. But it always feels like it's something different, and I can't figure out what's going on with this team. I don't know if are they just cursed? I don't know what's going on with these fourth quarter leads.
I don't either. I don't. The simple solution, and it's not a very nuanced one, is it's just a bad team. And incorporating new players, not incorporating new players, whether you have Jimmy Butler, you don't have Jimmy Butler, none of it seems to make any significant difference. This team is just not good enough. And that kind of is like a kind of an umbrella in terms of any excuse you want to use can fit into that, because it's a bad team. And that's just all there is to it. But there has to be something. Like, this coaching staff is too accomplished, too good, too familiar with this group to just say, well, we just kind of don't have it. That's not who they are. Like, there has to be some kind of defensive explanation, some kind of understanding about not getting the right shots, not getting the right players into the rotation. Like, there's a combination of those factors, and something just isn't working. And it's too frustrating, because this team, I think, is better than what their record reflects. But that's not the reality of who they are. They're not a good team right now. They don't know how to figure it out. They don't know how to get it done. And I'm not sure if it's psychological. I'm not sure if it's a talent deficit. I'm not sure if it's just a lack of leadership on the roster. We talked about the evolution of Bam. Is he taking a leap, etc.? We talked about Tyler Hero continuing to grow from his all-star campaign. And I don't know that any of those things are applicable. Like, I look at this group and what they've done over these last losses, and it's kind of confounding. And this is what bad teams typically do, is like they can, by virtue of just having some NBA talent or people who are competing for jobs because they're on 10-day contracts or they're two-way players, or, they're kind of like on the fringes of the NBA. Even guys like the Washington Wizards, teams like the Utah Jazz, the player that you mentioned, like, they're competing for something. They're trying. And so in the first half of games, those are usually competitive. And then what happens is, well, in the second half, the better team prevails, because they go, I'm not going to lose to X player. I'm not going to lose to these guys who I'm clearly better than. And they find a way to rise to the challenge, and they often come out victorious. Bad teams kind of go, well, we gave it our good effort for 3 quarters, but we really don't have it. We kind of were just fooling ourselves into thinking we could keep it going for 48 minutes. And then they kind of just they don't figure it out. They just let it slip through their fingertips because they don't have the talent.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're seeing with Miami is that they're not good enough. And I don't know what that is because you've got top 10 picks in Davion Mitchell and Andrew Wiggins. You've got Bam Adebayo, who's an all-star. You got Tyler Hero, who's an all-star. And as good as the Chicago Bulls have been competing of late, I don't think they're a very good team. I mean, they traded Levine, and they
were missing more guys than the Heat were in that game.
Yeah, no excuses. No excuses.
Yeah.
There's no excuses. Somehow they wind up beating this Heat team, and it's just inexcusable.
They stink. They stink. And you and I think that this team could be better than what they are and whatever, but Bill Parcells said it, and it holds true. You are what your record says you are. And right now, the Heat stink. 5 games under 500 for the first time since 2021. This team stinks. And yes, they just didn't make their threes, or they turned it over too much, or Terry Rozier was terrible, or there was injuries or whatever. And you've said this before. Everything needs to go right for this Heat team in order to win games. Another way of saying that, a synonym for that, is you stink. Right? Like, if everything has to go right for you to win, don't you kind of stink?
Yeah.
And like, you look at a team like Cleveland, for instance. Number 1 in the league in fourth quarter point differential. The Cleveland Cavaliers don't stink. They have a ton of talent. Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen. All those guys have been all-stars. Donovan Mitchell's going to be on MVP ballots this year. That is a deep team. That is a team that doesn't stink. That team has a lot of actualized talent on its roster. The Heat don't. We can look at this roster and like a guy like Davion Mitchell, and we like Kel'el Ware, and we like Nikola Jovic and Jaime Jaquez Jr. Are any of these guys top 100 players in the league right now? No, they're not.
No, they're not.
The Heat have 2, 3, if you include, I guess, Wiggins, for 7 games so far. But they've had 2 top 100 players on their roster for most of the season. Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo. That's it. And none of them are top 10 guys. None of them are Luka Doncic. None of them are these guys that can carry a franchise. They're good players. They're just a notch below whatever that stuff is.
Yeah.
This team's not very talented. Look at the rest. Like, I'm going to throw some names at you of teams. And you tell me, like, actualized talent right now, when you think about the top 100 players in the league. And you know how I think about this, David. I think if you have a lot of top 100 players, if you have 4 or 5 of these guys, you're in a pretty good spot in the NBA. I think the Heat have 2 guys on that list, maybe and 3 now, kind of going forward with Wiggins. But again, he's only been available for 7 games this year, so like he hasn't really counted so far.
And where would he even rank? Like 80th, 70th?
Around there. Not very high. Start with the Chicago Bulls, right? Like who? With everybody healthy, I think Miami is more talented than Chicago.
Yeah.
I don't think it's by much. Right? You look at the Bulls, they've got Vucevic is maybe like 90 to 100 somewhere, maybe.
Yeah.
Giddey is probably in the top 80 somewhere. Kobe White in the top 90 somewhere. I don't think they have a player as good as Bam or Tyler Hero, but they might have more numbers of guys in that top 100. Toronto.
Miami twice.
Toronto, 21-43 Toronto. Which roster is more talented? You can make an argument Toronto's roster is more talented than Miami's.
I could say that. I mean, Scotty Barnes, Quickly, RJ Barrett.
Portland.
Ooh. Better record at this point, right?
Not quite. Almost. Get to that in a second.
It's close.
Yeah. I would argue Portland's roster might be more talented than Miami's. Jeremy Grant, Anthony Simons, Shaedon Sharp. I don't know. It's right there. I don't think it, they don't have a player as good as Bam or Tyler Hero, but they got a lot of guys that I like on that roster. Right? You just kind of go down the list, man. It's like, even in the Eastern Conference, right? Detroit is more talented.
No,
Yeah.
I think that's pretty. I mean, they've got a player that's, I think, better than anybody on Miami's roster, and that's Cade Cunningham.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that,
Tobias
know.
Harris has been awesome for them.
Tobias Harris is a good player. I don't think he's. Yeah, I don't know. It's a tough one. I mean,
He's a top 100 guy.
Incredible. They're getting great contributions from Malik Beasley, and
Yeah,
I
top
think
100
that was.
guy.
I don't know if that's a. Yeah, is he? I don't know. That's he's been this year.
Yeah, this year.
I wouldn't say that normally that would be the case.
Okay.
I don't know. That's a tough one. Yeah,
I mean, Afsar Thompson. He's a top 100 guy already.
Yeah,
He's an elite wing defender. I don't know. Atlanta's more talented than Miami. You could argue. The point is, like, these are the teams that I'm listing, and I'm not even getting to Cleveland, Boston, New York, Milwaukee. Those teams are clearly more talented than Miami. And so I don't think this roster is very good, and we keep looking for reasons of why they're struggling. And I just go back to it. They stink. A few more stats, though, that I want to get to on the other side of this. Also, I rewatched the fourth quarter of last night's game, and one thing really stood out in terms of what the Heat could have done differently. We'll tell you what that is after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by DoorDash. NBA fans, get ready. They swoosh, you save, thanks to Dash Pass. Every time a player drops 50 or more points in a game, you score a huge deal the next day. It's simple. When any player scores 50 or more in a game during the 24-25 NBA regular season, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order, up to $10 off the next day from noon until midnight. Let's say you want to take advantage of this deal by having a little feast for you and your friends. Maybe you want to watch a big game, March Madness right around the corner. Guess what? If somebody drops 50 points in an epic performance, you can celebrate by ordering wings, pizza, or burgers from your favorite spot delivered straight to your door. It's so convenient, such a great way to save money. You're going to take advantage of the food delivery anyway. Might as well save money if somebody drops 50 or more. Sign up for Dash Pass and be ready to save. When any player scores 50 or more in a game, Dash Pass members get 50% off an order the next day, up to $10 off. Just use promo code NBA50 from noon to midnight after a 50-point game on eligible orders at participating merchants. Must have an active Dash Pass account. Terms do apply. Visit DoorDash to learn more. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. The best way to support the show, like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. A reminder that your favorite NBA team has a free daily newsletter introducing the Locked On Heat newsletter. One stop for ultimate Heat and league coverage with local analysis and amazing writing from Katie Heindel, Mike Shear, and Locked On fantasy basketball tips from Josh Lloyd. Sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com. Before I get to the fourth quarter rewatch here in a second, some stats. Here's Miami over the last 15 games in the fourth quarter. They've been outscored by 82 points in the fourth quarter. Worst mark in the NBA.
No, I'm kidding.
25. They're shooting 25% on threes in the fourth quarter. That's the worst mark in the NBA over the last 15 games. They've committed 55 turnovers, and it feels like most of them were in the fourth quarter to Trey Jones in last night's game. 55 turnovers over the last 15 games. That's 23rd in the NBA. It's bad.
Wow.
And opponents are shooting
6 teams. I'm surprised 7 teams are worse than Miami in turnovers in the fourth quarter.
Thank you, Utah. Thank you, Washington. Thank you to these teams. Yeah, I mean,
Charlotte,
but among the teams that are actually trying to win, yeah, it's bad. Yeah, I was a little surprised too. That it's like, oh wow, only 23rd. Opponents are shooting 36% against Miami in the fourth quarter. So opponents are shooting 36%. Miami is shooting 25% on threes. So I go to the fourth quarter of last night's game too. Miami 1 of 11 on 3-pointers. Chicago 3 of 11. So not great, but better, right? They shot 27%. Miami shot 9%. They made 1 3-pointer out of 11. They missed 10 of their 11 threes in that game. And this is what I go back to. Sometimes, look, Eric Spoelstra, we did a whole deep dive last week on some of the coaching concerns that we had with him this season. I don't know. You can't blame the three-point shooting on Spo. Even the shots they got Duncan Robinson 3 wide open looks in the first half of that fourth quarter. He just missed them. Tyler Hero missed 3 open looks. That's exactly, if you're the coach, those are the guys you want taking those shots. You're drawing up these plays and you're executing them, and they're just missing shots. Yeah. I don't know that that's coaching, and I don't think that Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson stink. They've been 2 of Miami's best players during this tough stretch. It's just unfortunate, right? It's bad luck, man. I don't know what to do with these fourth quarter stats, but here's the one that really stands out to me in terms of why Miami lost the game in the fourth quarter against Chicago. Chicago shot 59% overall in the fourth quarter. They went 3 of 11 from 3-point range, which meant that they went 10 of 11 from 2-point range. And they got to the rim every time they wanted. And the entire fourth quarter of that game, David, they found Tyler Hero's matchup, and they did what every other team does. They call up Tyler Hero's guide in a screen. They attack Hero. They get the switch. They kind of get the matchup they want, and they go to work. And Josh Giddey had 7 points. Kobe White had 10 points. Trey Jones had 13 points in the fourth quarter. And a lot of that, Trey Jones was mostly just getting it off of steals and in the open floor. But Kobe White and Josh Giddey were just getting the matchup that they wanted and hunting it and getting to their spots, especially Giddey. And I thought Tyler Hero was really bad defensively. I think he blew a couple of assignments in that fourth quarter, rewatching the tape. But here's where I will blame Spo. Why not go to the zone defense in the fourth quarter? The entire fourth quarter, they were playing man defense. And Erik Spoelstra, in a crunch, every time he's been in a bind, has gone to that zone defense. Not one possession of zone defense played in the fourth quarter. And why? That's where I think Miami lost the game. This is why you have the zone defense, is to protect against guys like Tyler Hero who are just not good one-on-one defenders. That's why you have the zone defense. That's why you've practiced it for 4 years now. I can't figure out why they didn't go to it in the third quarter. You shouldn't get beat by Giddey and Kobe White off the dribble. Mm-hmm. But when you are, why not go to the zone defense? That's the part I couldn't figure out.
Somewhat inexplicable. Because I was thinking about it, even as I was talking, or even as I was hearing you talk about this, it's like maybe it's like Spo's use of the timeout challenge or the foul challenge. Like maybe it's just against the grain, and maybe it's it's insulting to the game, and it's a distraction or something like that. But no, it's not. He doesn't have any kind of moral ambiguity tied to using the zone. Like, he uses it frequently. This is a weapon at his disposal. This is a weapon at his disposal that he uses comfortably and frequently. And yet, strangely enough, he didn't go to it at a point in time when Miami was being exploited defensively, where the zone certainly could have helped to a great degree. Doesn't make any sense. It does not make any sense. This has been, by far, maybe the lens is just a little bit clearer because this team isn't particularly talented, and maybe they're just, the expectations are different. They don't have Jimmy to save their collective asses. Maybe, I don't know. But there have been so many costly mistakes this season from Spo that just don't seem to make any sense. And this is just another one of a long line of those. And I think he's a better coach than these mistakes. Maybe he's not as good a coach as what everybody else thinks in terms of like, oh, he's a great mastermind or something like that. Certainly you need talent, and certainly he's able to maximize a lot of mediocre talents. And I love his enthusiasm in trying to say, you know what, we're better than this. We're working in the right direction. You lost to the Chicago Bulls on the second night of a back-to-back.
Well, and even he
should have won against Minnesota. You should have won against Chicago. You should be on a 2-game win streak right now, not a 4-game losing streak.
And even he admitted, we're working through some demons right now. And I'm like, all right, I don't know what that means. Do we need an exorcism?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I don't know. Tyler Hero after the game admitted like that was a bad loss. I'm like, all right, cool. Like, at least we're admitting it now. And by the way, I thought there were good things coming out of that Cleveland and even that Minnesota game. I thought there was good things coming out of it.
It was competitive, yeah.
There was nothing good coming out of this stupid Bulls loss. Like, there was nothing good coming out of this one. And even with a 11-point lead to start the fourth quarter, I didn't feel awesome about how this team was. The Bulls stink.
Yeah.
What are we doing here? Minnesota's a playoff team. Like,
yeah.
Cleveland's might be the best team in the league. And you finally had your starting lineup back. There was no excuse for this. To your point, you should have been up to 20. This should have been the one. We looked ahead on this 5-game homestand and be like, yep, circle Chicago. I know it's the second night of back-to-back, but whatever. Like, they stink. The Bulls are not good. The Heat are on their home court. They should win this game. And this was one that they could not afford to drop. And yet, there they are. And going back to the coaching part of it, too, I think it was problematic that they didn't go to the zone defense in the fourth quarter. Inexplicable. But if Duncan Robinson makes 1 or 2 of those 3-pointers to open up the fourth quarter, maybe we're just talking about something different. If Tyler Hero makes a couple of those open ones in the final 4 minutes, this is different. Like, the Heat win the game. And so you don't want to put it all on Spoelstra. But I have a hard time putting it all on Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson because they've been two of Miami's better players. They just miss shots that they normally make.
Have you seen this? Have you seen this stretch of games coming up?
Yeah,
It's brutal. It is really, really brutal. You got one more easy win. I'm at this point in time, I don't know that there is such thing as an easy win when you get the Charlotte Hornets on Monday. Then you got the Clippers that are really competitive. You got the Celtics, the Grizzlies, the Knicks, the Pistons, the Rockets, and then you get another sort of gimme with the Hornets again. But in between, and then just to come back here and face Jimmy Butler and the Golden State Warriors.
great.
Not looking good.
Um,
Not looking good. Beware the Ides of March because you're going to be on a 10-game losing streak if you're not careful.
I might be on an island somewhere during that Warriors game. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be
Metaphysically
here.
speaking, or
what are they? 10-1, 11-1 now with Jimmy Butler. No, physically speaking, I'm gonna get on a plane. I'm gonna risk it. I'm gonna get on a plane today, and I don't care if it might land upside down somewhere. I'd rather be on a plane upside down than watching Jimmy Butler. Whatever.
Carve up Miami.
Yeah, I don't. This is not awesome. Are the Heat quiet tanking, David? We're gonna talk about that on the other end of this break.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, you customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets. It's so easy to use. You can stay in on the action with tournament games happening almost every day. There's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is so simple to use. When you win, you get paid instantly, no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. We'll be right back.
Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. The best way to support the show, like and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Quick standings update. Miami, with this loss, has dropped, over the losses over the weekend, have dropped to 9th in the Eastern Conference. David, you and I had this discussion. It does not sound like they listened. You could not fall below Atlanta and Orlando. Right now, Miami is tied with Orlando at 24 games back. They're a half game back of Atlanta. So there's still a chance of climbing back into that 7-8 matchup. But in that 9-10 matchup in the play-in, you needed to win 2 games in a row. And as Miami has proved time after time, they are way better at losing games in a row than winning games in a row. But that's where they are in the standings. Let's take a look at Tankathon and where they are in terms of the draft lottery here. Miami has the 11th worst record in the league. That gives them an 8.5% chance of landing a top 4 pick in the lottery, a 1.8% chance of landing the first overall pick and maybe getting Cooper Flagg in this lottery. But here, we looked at the update. We looked at the standings, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, David, I think.
Yeah.
And I said, there's no way this team can get into the top 10 in terms of the draft lottery. Like, they're too far ahead right now. Teams like Portland and San Antonio and Chicago are going to keep losing and whatever. Well, I was wrong.
Not so fast.
Miami is, they proved me wrong, this Heat team. They're a game and a half back of Portland right now for number 10. And if you get into that top 10, all of a sudden you go from an 8.5% chance to about a 14% chance of landing a top 4 pick. You are a game and a half away from San Antonio at 9, where if you had the 9th worst record, now you have a 20% chance of landing a top 4 pick. And everybody keeps looking at Cooper Flagg as sort of the guy. He's the big name in this draft. There are legitimately 4 good players. You start talking to people that know this stuff, 4 legitimately really good players in this draft that people are going to want, right? Between Cooper Flagg, the 2 Rutgers guy, and VJ Hedgecombe or whatever his name is. That's sort of your top 4. If Miami can get one of those guys, we're talking about a major influx of talent that this team has not had since the last time they had a top 5 pick. I don't know. Is the quiet tank on? Should this team just be tanking at this point? Where do they go?
Yes.
Because is there a reason why this team shouldn't be tanking?
I I'm hardwired to think that tanking is not something you should do. I've covered teams before. You've covered teams before. You've been around these groups when losing is just so woven into the culture and the mindset, where it's kind of like what I was talking about in terms of like, that's the micro view on a 48-minute game. You just kind of go, oh, we can't really do this. Like, you kind of just look yourself in the mirror and go, yeah, we're not really good enough. Now imagine that over the course of months, years, because these are just teams that just continue to be bad and bad and bad and bad, and they don't know what to do. And that's how they get stuck, is because you have a losing mindset. We can try hard, but we'll never be good enough. And you're a competitive person because guess what? You're one of 450 players that are in the NBA on a planet of 7.5 billion people. You are extremely competitive. You are extremely talented. You are extremely special. And yet somehow, even within the context of those 450 players, you feel more comfortable embracing losing than you do the pursuit of winning, because you recognize that you're just not good enough. And that's a dangerous place to be. I don't think Miami is going to continue to view themselves as a losing organization. I think Bam is too comfortable winning, Tyler's too comfortable winning, etc. So it's a strange place to be. I think they could risk the tank and still find that culture that we've talked about, but they need an injection of winning, and I don't know where they'll get it from. I don't know if that means grabbing another player the same way Jimmy came in 2019. I don't know if that means adding somebody else in some capacity, or just maybe a draft, or I don't know. I really don't know what the recipe is, but it's a slippery slope. I think this team is strong enough internally to withstand the idea of tanking this season and be able to retain their culture and the idea of winning. But right now, without that winner and without that injection of winning attitude, which is so significant. Like, one of the things that I remember talking about, and you weren't covering the team at the time, and interviewing Kelly Olynyk for the show, and him talking about the Orlando bubble and Jimmy Butler from, I think, the beginning of the 2019 season, saying, and when we win this thing, we're going to, celebrate, and when we win this thing, like, just putting it out there. And this was a team that had struggled the year before, barely made the playoffs in Dwayne's last year. Oh, they didn't make the playoffs in Dwayne's last year. They struggled. They couldn't figure it out. And then Jimmy comes in there, and all of a sudden he's talking about winning this whole championship thing. And it's like, what are you talking about? We'll be happy to even make the playoffs. Remember all the people talking about Jimmy Butler joining this team and saying he's come to retire in South Beach, like so many people had before him. Instead, what it did was it rewired this team to thinking, God damn, maybe we could win this thing. Maybe we can believe in ourselves. Maybe we are good enough to win this. And he told me that. He was telling me how, during, especially in the bubble, when it was such a psychologically taxing moment for so many of these players, this team stayed strong and had this internal belief. They were built for that in a way that no other team was. Unfortunately, injuries derailed the opportunity, and they weren't able to manifest or live up to that manifestation as effectively as they'd wanted to. But that's just my concern, is that I don't know where they're going to get that from. I don't know that Bam is the kind of vocal leader at this point in time. Not to criticize him necessarily, but I just don't know whether or not he's this person. Despite being the team captain, is he getting in Tyler's face and saying, you better goddamn hit this shot?
Well,
is he getting Duncan's face?
Do they need that? Do they need that same brand of leadership that Jimmy had? You could say, well, Jimmy's not here, and look at it. And yeah, to your point, maybe that is what they need. I would say that, look, yes, your concerns about tanking and the issue of that losing mentality taking hold, that is a concern. But this is not the Utah Jazz. This is not the Washington Wizards, where I think that is a real concern for those organizations. Bam has been to the finals twice. Eric Spoelstra has championships as a head coach. This team can withstand a month of tanking, 2 months of tanking.
You say
and
that.
Just and get back to
what was 3 seasons ago that Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert were leading this team on a 7-game series against some really competitive groups, and they were a good team not that long ago, and now we're kind of
traded their guys
together. They did, and that might be what happens here. I don't know. I'm just saying.
I'm not saying tank multiple seasons. Just the rest of this one. The rest of this one. I'm not saying to do it. I do think if I'm going to point to a reason of why not to do it, does a player like Kevin Durant want to join a team that was just picking in the lottery in Miami, or does he see himself as the final piece of the puzzle to a lottery team or a team that was in the first round of the playoffs? That would be my main concern. I don't know the answer to that. I have no idea. But could you go out and get that kind of player if you're picking in the lottery this year, in the top 10 this year? Or does that not matter at all? That would be the only concern I have at this point, because right now, this season sucks. I want it to be over. This team stinks. I don't see the point in this. And like I said before, I don't think you tank in the middle of the year, but as we get 5 weeks out of the end of the season, now's the time. If you're going to just find a hamstring tweak somewhere on Bam Adebayo's body, if you're going to say, Wiggins, you know what, that ankle doesn't look quite right, we're going to make sure that you take the time, all the time you need. Kalel, you're a 7-footer, take all the time you need with your knee and your ankle and whatever. Yeah. Jaime, maybe it's just physically, like, take all the time you need. All of it. And like, now, I don't know. Now I'm just thinking, why not? Why not? Because you get one pick in that lottery. The best eras of Heat basketball, I know we always thought this team never tanks, whatever, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
They don't win a championship if they don't have a top 5 pick in Dwayne Wade. Now, that wasn't an on-purpose tank. That was because of Alonzo Mourning's kidney disease, and a lot of things kind of ended up
there. Is there anybody there that's that good? Like, I mean, I guess we'll see, right?
The only way to find out is to pick these players, man.
Like, I mean, Dwayne wasn't Dwayne until he had that run in Marquette, like, in the Final Four, et cetera. I mean,
March Madness coming up.
Yeah, I mean, this is where you find that winner, and it's going to prove a lot.
You've got Cooper Flagg, who sounds like as blue chip of a prospect as we've seen in a long time. He's not Victor Wembanyama, but people love this guy. Yeah. Dylan Harper at Rutgers, he's got like this kind of James Harden isolation type thing, 6'6", 220. Like, he's a big scoring guard. Feels like the Heat could use a player like that. Ace Bailey out of Rutgers, kind of like this Tracy McGrady throwback kind of score. 6'10", scoring wing. Feels like the Heat could use a guy like that. VJ Edgecombe, 6'5", guard out of Baylor, shoots the lights out from three-point range. Averages 2.3 steals per game. He's like a two-way guy. Feels like the Heat could use a guy like that.
For sure.
That's where you find these guys. It's not going to hit every time, but given Miami's track record in the draft, they've been pretty good. Yeah. Now give them a chance to do it in the top 5. I don't know.
I think so. Maybe
it doesn't even matter. Maybe they just stink enough that why even have this conversation?
We're talking about the stretch coming up. Like, I mean, you're facing good competitive playoff teams. They're not going to take it easy. They're fighting for home court advantage in some cases. They're fighting for different things, but they're fighting. They're competing. Miami's kind of just like, well, we're kind of sort of good enough for, like, I don't know, 40 minutes, not even 36 minutes, just like 40 minutes. We're just kind of there. But those last 8, we really don't have that effort for the full 8. Maybe they're just kind of still, maybe they're feeling March Madness. Is this like a quiet ode to March Madness where they only play for 40 minutes because they can't go the full 48?
I don't know, man. The fourth quarter things is crazy. I don't think the quiet tank is on. I don't think they're doing this on purpose. I just think they stink. I just think. All right, I'm gonna simulate the lottery on Tankathon just for fun before we get out of here. Miami still has the 11th pick. Boo. All right, maybe we'll do it again next time, and eventually they'll end up with the number 1 pick. All right.
Start every show and finish every show with a running of the Tankathon.
That's just gonna be the rest of the season for Heat fans, just simulating the lottery. Can we get Cooper Flagg now? Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.